Greetings, my friends. We are on the final chapters of Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. So, let's see where we are now. We're going to begin with chapter 21 and finish the book today. So, sit back, relax, get yourself a cup of coffee, diet soda, regular soda, maybe some popcorn even, and just listen along as we finish Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. Chapter 21. Winnie pulled her little rocking chair up to her bedroom window and sat down. The rocking chair had been given to her when she was very small, but she still squeezed into it sometimes when no one was looking, because the rocking made her almost remember something pleasant, something soothing that would never quite come up to the surface of her mind. And tonight, she wanted to be soothed. The constable had brought her home. They had seized her at once, flinging the gate open and swooping down on her, her mother weeping, her father speechless, hugging her to him, her grandmother babbling with excitement. There was a painful pause when the constable told them she had gone away of her own free will, but it only lasted for a moment. They would not believe it, and her grandmother said, "It was the elves. We heard them. They must have bewitched her." And so they had borne her into the house, and after she had taken a bath they insisted upon, they fed and petted her and refused, with little laughs and murmurs, to accept her answers to their questions. She had gone away with the Tucks because, well, she just wanted to. The Tucks had been very kind to her, had given her flapjacks, taken her fishing. The Tucks were good and gentle people. All this would have been swept away in any case, however, this good impression of her friends which she was trying to create, when she told them what had happened to the man in the yellow suit. Had they really given him the wood in exchange for finding her? They had. Well, perhaps he wouldn't want it now. May had hit him with the shotgun. He was very sick. They received this news with mingled hope and horror, and her father said, "I suppose the wood will be ours again if that man should... that is, if he doesn't." "You mean if he dies," Winnie said flatly, and they had sat back shocked. Soon after, they put her to bed with many kisses, but they peered at her anxiously over their shoulders as they tiptoed out of her bedroom, as if they sensed that she was different now from what she had been before, as if some part of her had slipped away. Well, thought Winnie, crossing her arms on the windowsill, she was different. Things had happened to her that were hers alone and had nothing to do with them. It was the first time, and no amount of telling about it could help them understand or share what she felt. It was satisfying and lonely, both at once. She rocked, gazing out at the twilight, and the soothing feeling came reliably into her bones. That feeling, it tied her to them, to her mother, her father, her grandmother, with strong threads too ancient and precious to be broken. But there were new threads now, tugging and insistent, which tied her just as firmly to the Tucks. Winnie watched the sky slide into blackness over the wood outside her window. There was not the least hint of a breeze to soften the heavy August night. And then, over the treetops, on the faraway horizon, there was a flash of white. Heat lightning. Again and again it throbbed without a sound. It was like pain, she thought, and suddenly she longed for a thunderstorm. She cradled her head in her arms and closed her eyes. At once the image of the man in the yellow suit rose up. She could see him again, sprawled motionless on the sun-blanched grass. "He can't die," she whispered, thinking of May. "He mustn't." And then she considered his plans for the water in the spring, and Tuck's voice saying, "They'd all come running like pigs to slops." And she found herself thinking, if it's true about the spring, then he has to die. He must. And that's why she did it. Then she heard hoofbeats on the road below, a horse hurrying into the village, and not long after, there were footsteps and a knocking on the door. Winnie crept out of her room and crouched in the shadows at the top of the stairs. It was the constable. She heard him saying, "So that's that, Mr. Foster. We can't press no kidnapping charges, since your little girl claims there wasn't no kidnapping. But it don't matter now anyway. The doc just got back a few minutes ago. That feller, the one you sold your land to, he's dead." There was a pause, and the murmur of other voices, then a match striking, the acrid smell of fresh cigar smoke. "Yep, she got him a good one, all right. He never come to. So it's an open and shut case, since I seen her do it. Eyewitness, no question about it. They'll hang her for sure." Winnie went back to her room and climbed into bed. She lay in the dark, propped up on the pillows, and stared at the lighter square of her window. At the heat lightning throbbing, it was like pain, she thought again, a dull pain on the fringes of the sky. May had killed the man in the yellow suit, and she had meant to kill him. Winnie had killed a wasp once, in fear and anger, just in time to spare herself a stinging. She had slammed at the wasp with a heavy book and killed it. And then, seeing its broken body, the thin wings stilled, she had wished it were alive again. She had wept for that wasp. Was May weeping now for the man in the yellow suit? In spite of her wish to spare the world, did she wish he were alive again? There was no way of knowing, but May had done what she thought she had to do. Winnie closed her eyes to shut out the silent pulsing of the lightning. Now, she would have to do something. She had no idea what, but something. May Tuck must not go to the gallows. Chapter 22. Next morning, Winnie went out to the fence directly after breakfast. It was the hottest day yet, so heavy that the slightest exertion brought on a flood of perspiration and an exhaustion in the joints. 2 days before, they would have insisted that she stay indoors, but now, this morning, they were careful with her, a little gingerly, as if she were an egg. She had said, "I'm going outside now," and they had said, "All right, but come in if it gets too hot, won't you, dear?" And she had answered, "Yes." The earth, where it was worn bald under the gate, was cracked and hard as rock, a lifeless tan color, and the road was an aisle of brilliant velvet dust. Winnie leaned against the fence, her hands gripping the warm metal of the bars, and thought about May behind another set of bars in the jailhouse. And then, lifting her head, she saw the toad. It was squatting where she had seen it first, across the road. "Hello," she said, very glad to see it. The toad did not so much as flick a muscle or blink an eye. It looked dried out today, parched. "It's thirsty," said Winnie to herself. No wonder on a day like this. She left the fence and went into the cottage. "Granny, can I have some water in a dish? There's a toad out front that looks as if he's just about to die of thirst." "A toad?" said her grandmother, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Nasty things, toads." "Not this one," said Winnie. "This one is always out there, and I like him. Can I give him a drink of water?" "Toads don't drink water, Winifred. It wouldn't do him any good." "They don't drink water at all?" "No, they take it through their skins like a sponge when it rains." But it hasn't rained in forever, said Winnie, alarmed. I could sprinkle some water on him, couldn't I? Wouldn't that help, wouldn't it? Well, I suppose so, said her grandmother. Where is he? In the yard? No, said Winnie. He's across the road. I'll come with you then. I don't want you leaving the yard alone. But when they came out to the fence, Winnie balancing a small bowl of water with enormous care, the toad was gone. Well, he must be all right, said her grandmother, if he could hop off. With mingled disappointment and relief, Winnie tipped the water onto the cracked earth at the gate. It was sucked in immediately, and the wet brown stain it left behind paled and vanished almost as quickly. I never saw such heat in all my life, said Winnie's grandmother, dabbing uselessly at the neck with a handkerchief. Don't stay out here much longer. I won't, said Winnie, and was left alone once more. She sat down on the grass and sighed. May! What could she do to set May free? She closed her eyes against the glaring light and watched a little dizzily as brilliant patterns of red and orange danced inside her eyelids. And then, miraculously, Jessie was there, crouching just on the other side of the fence. Winnie, he hissed, you sleeping? Oh, Jessie! Her eyes flew open and she reached through the fence to grasp his hand. I'm so glad to see you. What can we do? We have to get her out. Miles got a plan, but I don't see how it can work, said Jessie, speaking quickly, his voice almost a whisper. He knows a lot about carpentering. He says he can take Ma's window frames right straight out of the wall, bars and all, and she can climb through. We're going to try it tonight when it gets dark. Only trouble is, that constable keeps watching her every minute. He's so darned proud at having a prisoner in that new jail of his. We've been down to see her. She's all right, but even if she can climb through the window, he'll come after her as soon as she's gone. Seems to me he'll notice right off. That don't give us much time to get away, but we got to try it. There ain't no other way. Anyhow, I come to say goodbye. We won't be able to come back here for a long, long time. Winnie, if we get away, they'll be looking for Ma. Winnie, listen, I won't see you again, not for ages. Look now, here's a bottle of water from a spring. You keep it, and then, no matter where you are, when you're 17, Winnie, you can drink it, and then come find us. We'll leave directions somehow. Winnie, please say you will. He pressed the little bottle into her hands, and Winnie took it, closing her fingers over it. Jessie, wait, she whispered breathlessly, for all at once she had the answer. I can help. When your mother climbs out the window, I'll climb in and take her place. I can wrap myself up in her blanket, and when the constable looks in, he won't be able to tell the difference. Not in the dark. I can lump up and look a lot bigger. Miles can even put the window back. That would give you time to get away. You'd have at least till morning. Jessie squinted at her, and then he said, Yep, you know it might work. It might just make the difference. But I don't know as Pa's going to want you to take any risk. What'll they say to you after, when they find out? I don't know, said Winnie, but it doesn't matter. Tell your father I want to help. I have to help. If it wasn't for me, there wouldn't have been any trouble in the first place. Tell him I have to. Well, all right. Can you get out after dark? Yes, said Winnie. Well, then at midnight, Winnie. I'll be waiting for you right here at midnight. Winifred, an anxious voice called from the cottage. Who's that you're talking to? Winnie stood up and turned to answer. It's just a boy, Granny. I'll be in a minute. When she turned around again, Jessie was gone. Winnie clutched the little bottle in her hands and tried to control the rising excitement that made her breath catch. At midnight, she would make a difference in the world. Chapter 23. It was the longest day. Mindlessly hot, unspeakably hot, too hot to move or think. The countryside, the village of Tree Gap, the wood, all lay defeated. Nothing stirred. The sun was a ponderous circle without edges, a roar without a sound, a blazing glare, so thorough and remorseless that even in the Fosters' parlor, with curtains drawn, it seemed to have an actual presence. You could not shut it out. Winnie's mother and grandmother sat plaintive all afternoon in the parlor, fanning themselves and sipping lemonade, their hair unsettled and their knees loose. It was totally unlike them, this lapse from gentility, and it made them much more interesting. But Winnie didn't stay with them. Instead, she took her own brimming glass to her room and sat in her little rocker by the window. Once she had hidden Jessie's bottle in a bureau drawer, there was nothing to do but wait. In the hall outside her room, the grandfather's clock ticked deliberately, unimpressed with anyone's impatience, and Winnie found herself rocking to its rhythm. Forward, back, forward, back. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She tried to read, but it was so quiet that she could not concentrate. And so she was glad when it was time for supper. It was something to do, though none of them could manage more than a nibble. But later, when Winnie went out again to the fence, she saw that the sky was changing. It was not so much clouding up as thickening somehow from every direction at once, the blank blue gone to haze. And then, as the sun sank reluctantly behind the treetops, the haze hardened to a brilliant brownish yellow. In the wood, the leaves turned underside up, giving the trees a silvery cast. The air was noticeably heavier. It pressed on Winnie's chest and made her breathing difficult. She turned and went back into the cottage. "It's going to rain, I think," she told the prostrate group in the parlor, and the news was received with little moans of gratitude. Everyone went to bed early, closing windows firmly on their way, for outside, though it was almost dark, shreds of the hard brown yellow light lingered on the rims of things, and there was a wind beginning. Small gusts that rattled the fence gate and set the trees to rustling. The smell of rain hung sweet in the air. "What a week this has been," said Winnie's grandmother. "Well, thank the Lord it's almost over." And Winnie thought to herself, yes, it's almost over. There were 3 hours to wait before midnight and nothing whatever to do. Winnie wandered restlessly about her room, sat in her rocker, lay on her bed, counted the ticks of the hall clock. Beneath her excitement, she was thick with guilt. For the second time in 3 short days, though they seemed many more than that, she was about to do something which she knew would be forbidden. She didn't have to ask. Winnie had her own strong sense of rightness. She knew that she could always say afterward, "Well, you never told me not to." But how silly that would be. Of course, it would never occur to them to include such a thing on their list of don'ts. She could hear them saying it and almost smiled. "Now remember, Winifred, don't bite your fingernails. Don't interrupt when someone else is speaking, and don't go down to the jailhouse at midnight to change places with prisoners." Still, it wasn't really funny. What would happen in the morning when the constable found her in the cell and had to bring her home for the second time? What would they say? Would they ever trust her again? Winnie squirmed, sitting in the rocker, and swallowed uncomfortably. Well, she would have to make them understand somehow, without explaining. The hall clock chimed 11. Outside, the wind had stopped. Everything, it seemed, was waiting. Winnie lay down and closed her eyes, thinking of Tuck and May, of Miles and Jessie. Her heart softened. They needed her to take care of them, for in the funny sort of way that had struck her at the first, they were helpless, or too trusting. Well, something like that. Anyway, they needed her. She would not disappoint them. May would go free. No one would have to find out. Winnie would not have to find out that May could not. But Winnie blocked the picture from her mind, the horror that would prove the secret. Instead, she turned her thoughts to Jessie. When she was 17, would she? If it was true, would she? And if she did, would she be sorry afterwards? Tuck had said, "It's something you don't find out how you feel until afterwards." But no, it wasn't true. She knew that now, here in her own bedroom. They were probably crazy after all. But she loved them anyway. They needed her. And thinking this, Winnie fell asleep. She woke with a jerk some time later and sat up alarmed. The clock was ticking steadily. The darkness was complete. Outside, the night seemed poised on tiptoe, waiting, holding its breath for the storm. Winnie stole out to the hall and frowned at the clock face in the shadows. At last she could make it out, for the black Roman numerals were just barely visible against their white ground. The brass hands glowed faintly. As she peered at them, the long hand snapped forward one more notch with a loud click. She had not missed her moment. It was 5 minutes to midnight. Chapter 24. Leaving the house was so easy that Winnie felt faintly shocked. She had half expected that the instant she put a foot on the stairs, they would leap from their beds and surround her with accusations. But no one stirred, and she was struck by the realization that if she chose, she could slip out night after night without their knowing. The thought made her feel more guilty than ever she should once more taking advantage. The thought made her feel more guilty than ever she should once more take advantage of their trust. But tonight, this one last time, she had to. There was no other way. She opened the door and slipped out into the heavy August night. Leaving the cottage was like leaving something real and moving into a dream. Her body felt weightless, and she seemed to float down the path to the gate. Jessie was there, waiting. Neither of them spoke. He took her hand, and they ran together, lightly down the road, past other sleeping cottages, into the dim and empty center of the village. The big glass windows here were lidded eyes that didn't care, that barely saw them, barely gave them back reflections. The blacksmith shop, the mill, the church, the stores, so busy and alive in daylight, were hunched, deserted now, dark piles and shapes without a purpose or a meaning. And then ahead, Winnie saw the jailhouse, its new wood still unpainted, lamplight spilling through a window at the front, and there in the cleared yard behind it, like a great L upside down, was the gallows. So here's an L, right? No, there's an L. You turn it upside down, that's what the gallows looks like. The sky flashed white, but this time it wasn't heat lightning. For a few moments later, a low mumble, still far away, announced at last the coming storm. A fresh breeze lifted Winnie's hair, and from somewhere in the village behind them, a dog barked. Two shadows detached themselves from the gloom as Winnie and Jessie came up. Tuck pulled her to him and hugged her hard, and Miles squeezed her hand. No one said a word. Then the four of them crept to the back of the building. Here, too high for Winnie to see into, was a barred window through which, from the room in the front, light glowed faintly. Winnie peered up at it, at the blackness of the bars with the dim gold of the light between. Into her head came lines from an old poem. Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. Over and over the lines repeated themselves in her head till they were altogether meaningless. Another roll of thunder sounded. The storm was moving nearer. Then Miles was standing on a box. He was pouring oil around the frame of the window. A swirl of wind brought the thick, rich smell of it down to Winnie's nostrils. Tuck handed up a tool, and Miles began to pry at the nails securing the window frame. Miles knew carpentry. Miles could do the job. Winnie shivered and held tight to Jessie's hand. One nail was free. Another. Tuck reached up to receive them as they came out, one by one. A fourth nail screeched as it was pried up, and Miles poured on more oil. From the front of the jailhouse, the constable yawned noisily and began to whistle. The whistling came nearer. Miles dropped down. They heard the constable's footsteps coming up to May's cell. The barred door clanked, then the footsteps receded. The whistling grew fainter. An inner door shut, and the lamp glow disappeared. At once, Miles was up again and prying at the nails. An eighth was out, a ninth, a 10th. Winnie counted carefully, while behind her counting her mind sang, "Stone walls do not a prison make." Miles handed down the prying tool. He grasped the bars of the window firmly, ready to pull, and stood poised. "What's he waiting for?" thought Winnie. "Why doesn't he—" Then a flash of lightning, and soon after a crack of thunder. In the midst of the noise, Miles gave a mighty heave. But the window did not budge. The thunder ebbed. Winnie's heart sank. What if it was all impossible? What if the window would never come out? What if— She looked over her shoulder at the dark shape of the gallows and shuddered. Again a flash of lightning, and this time a crashing burst of noise from the swirling sky. Miles yanked. The window frame sprang free, and still grasping it by the bars, he tumbled backward off the box. The job was done. 2 arms appeared in the hole left by the missing frame. "May!" Her head appeared. It was too dark to see her face. The window— what if it was too small for her to squeeze through? What if— But now her shoulders were out. She groaned softly. Another flash of lightning lit her face for an instant, and Winnie saw an expression there of deep concentration, tip of tongue protruding, brows furrowed. Now Tuck was on the box, helping her, giving her his own shoulders to pull on. Miles and Jessie close at his sides, arms upstretched, eager to receive her bulk. Her hips were free. Now, look out, here she came, her skirts tearing on the rough edges of the boards, arms flailing, and they were all in a heap on the ground. Another crash of thunder muffled Jessie's bursting, exultant laugh. May was free. Winnie clasped her trembling hands thankfully, and then the first drop of rain plopped precisely on the tip of her nose. The Tucks unentangled themselves and turned to her. One by one, as the rain began, they drew her to them and kissed her. One by one, she kissed them back. Was it rain on May's face? On Tuck's? Or was it tears? Jessie was last. He put his arms around her and hugged her tight and whispered the single word, "Remember." Then Miles was on the box again, lifting her. Her hands grasped the edges of the window. This time she waited with him. When the thunder came, it tore the sky apart with its roar, and as it came, she pulled herself through and dropped to the cot inside, unharmed. She looked up at the open square and saw the frame with Miles' hands holding it. The next obliging roll of thunder saw it wedged once more into place, and then— would Miles put back the nails? She waited. Rain came in sheets now, riding the wind, flung crosswise through the night. Lightning crackled, a brilliant jagged streak, and thunder rattled the little building. The tension in the parched earth eased and vanished. Winnie felt it go. The muscles of her stomach loosened, and all at once she was exhausted. Still she waited. Would Miles put back the nails? At last, standing tiptoe on the cot, she grasped the bars of the window, pulling herself up until she could just see through. Rain blew into her face, but the next flash of lightning, looking down, she saw that the yard was empty. And before the thunder followed, in a pause, while wind and rain held back for one brief moment, she thought she heard the fading in the distance, the tinkling little melody of the music box. The Tucks, her darling Tucks, were gone. Chapter 25. The first week of August was long over, and now, though autumn was still some weeks away, there was a feeling that the year had begun its downward arc, that the wheel was turning again, slowly now, but soon to go faster, turning once more in its changeless sweep of change. Winnie, standing at the fence in front of the Touch-Me-Not cottage, could hear the new note in the voices of the birds. Whole clouds of them lifted up, chattering into the sky above the wood, and then settled only to lift again. Across the road, goldenrod was coming into bloom, and an early drying milkweed had opened its rough pod, exposing a host of downy-headed seeds. As she watched, one of these detached itself into a sudden breeze and sailed sedately off, while others leaned from the pod as if to observe its departure. Winnie dropped down cross-legged on the grass. 2 weeks had gone by since the night of the storm, the night of May Tuck's escape, and May had not been found. There was no trace of her at all, or of Tuck, or Miles, or Jessie. Winnie was profoundly grateful for that, but she was also profoundly tired. It had been a trying 2 weeks. For the 100th time she reviewed it all, how the constable had come into the cell soon after she had settled herself on the cot, how he had let down a shutter over the window to keep out the rain, how, then, he had stood over her as she hunched under the blanket, her breath heavy, trying to look as large as possible, how finally he had gone away and not come back till morning. But she had not dared to sleep for fear she would kick off the blanket and give herself away, give the Tucks away unwittingly. So she had lain there, pulse-thudding, eyes wide open. She would never forget the rattle of the rain on the jailhouse roof, or the smell of wet wood, or of the darkness that saved them all, or how difficult it was not to cough. She wanted to cough as soon as it occurred to her that she mustn't, and she passed a long hour trying to swallow away the tickle that perversely constricted her throat. And she would never forget the crash outside that made her heart race, that she could not investigate and did not understand till morning, when on the way home she saw that the gallows had blown over in the wind. But oh, it made her tremble still to remember the constable's face when he found her. She had heard first a bustling in the front of the jail and smelled fresh coffee, and had sat up, stiff with apprehension. Then the inner door opened, the door, she now saw, which separated the office from the pair of cells. And in the light that streamed before him, the constable appeared, carrying a breakfast tray. He was whistling cheerfully. He came up to the barred window of her cell and looked in, and his whistling died on his lips, as if it had run down and needed to be wound up again. But this comical astonishment lasted for a moment only, and then his face flushed red with anger. Winnie had sat on the cot, eyes downcast, feeling very small, and very like a criminal. In fact, he was soon shouting that if she were older, he'd have to keep her there, that it was a crime, what she had done. She was an accomplice. She had helped a murderer escape. She was, in fact, a criminal, but too young to be punished by the law. Worse luck, he told her, for she badly needed punishing. She was released then into the custody of her mother and father, and these new words, accomplice and custody, chilled her blood. Over and over they asked her, shocked at first and then wistful. Why had she done such a thing? Why? She was their daughter. They had trusted her. They had tried to bring her up properly, with a true sense of right and wrong. They did not understand. And finally she had sobbed the only truth there was into her mother's shoulder, the only explanation. The Tucks were her friends. She had done it because, in spite of everything, she loved them. This, of all the things her family understood, and afterwards they drew together staunchly around her. It was hard for them in the village. Winnie knew it was, and the knowledge gave her pain, for they were proud, and she had shamed them. Still, this side of the affair was not without its benefits, at least for Winnie. Though she was confined to the yard indefinitely and could go nowhere, not even with her mother or her grandmother, the other children wandered by to look at her, to talk to her through the fence. They were impressed by what she had done. She was a figure of romance to them now, where before she had been too neat, too prissy, almost somehow too clean to be a real friend. Winnie sighed and plucked at the grass around her ankles. School would open soon. It wouldn't be so bad. In fact, she thought, as her spirits lifted, this year it might be rather nice. And then 2 things happened. First of all, the toad appeared out of the weeds, and on her side of the road this time. It bounced out of a cover of old dandelion leaves and landed, plop, just beyond the fence. If she had reached her hand through the bars, she could have touched it. And next, a large brown dog with an easy gait and dangling tongue came loping down the road toward them. He stopped opposite the fence and looked at Winnie with a friendly swish of his tail. And then he saw the toad. At once he began to bark, his eyes bright. He pranced up, his hind quarters leaping independently from side to side, nose close to the toad, his voice shrill with enthusiasm. "Don't!" cried Winnie, leaping to her feet and flapping her arms. "Go away, dog! Stop that! Go away! Shoo!" The dog paused. He looked up at Winnie's frantic dancing, and then he looked at the toad, who had pressed down close to the dirt, eyes tight shut. It was too much for him. He began to bark again and reached out a long paw. "Oh!" cried Winnie. "Oh, don't do that! Leave my toad alone!" And before excuse me. Excuse me. And before she had time to realize what she was doing, she bent, reached through the bars, and snatched the toad up and away from harm, dropping it on the grass inside the fence. A feeling of revulsion swept through her. While the dog whined, pawing uselessly at the fence, she stood rigid, staring at the toad, wiping her hand again on the skirt of her dress. And then she remembered the actual feel of the toad, and the revulsion passed. She knelt and touched the skin of its back. It was rough and soft, both at once, and cool. Winnie stood up and looked at the dog. He was waiting outside the fence, his head on one side, peering at her longingly. "It's my toad," Winnie told him, "so you'd better leave it alone." And then, on an impulse, she turned and ran into the cottage, up to her room, to the bureau drawer where she had hidden Jessie's bottle, the bottle of water from the spring. In a moment she was back again. The toad still squatted where she had dropped it. The dog still waited at the fence. Winnie pulled out the cork from the mouth of the bottle, and kneeling, she poured the precious water very slowly and carefully over the toad. The dog watched this operation, and then, yawning, was suddenly bored. He turned and loped away back down the road to the village. Winnie picked up the toad and held it for a long time, without the least disgust in the palm of her hand. It sat calmly, blinking, and the water glistened on its back. The little bottle was empty now. It lay on the grass at Winnie's feet. But if all of it was true, there was more water in the wood. There was plenty more. Just in case, when she was 17, if she should decide, there was more water in the wood. Winnie smiled. Then she stooped and put her hand through the fence and set the toad free. "There," she said, "you're safe forever." Epilogue. The sign said, "Welcome to Tree Gap," but it was hard to believe that this was really Tree Gap. The main street hadn't changed so very much, but there were many other streets now crossing the main street. The road itself was blacktopped. There was a white line painted down its center. May and Tuck, on the seat of a clattering wooden wagon, bumped slowly into Tree Gap behind the fat old horse. They had seen continuous change and were accustomed to it, but here it seemed shocking and sad. "Look," said Tuck. "Look, May, ain't that where the wood used to be? It's gone. Not a stick or a stump left. And a cottage, too. That's gone, too." It was very hard to recognize anything, but from the little hill which had once lain outside the village and was now very much part of it, they thought they could figure things out. "Yes," said May, "that's where it was, I do believe. Of course, it's been so long since we was here, I can't tell for certain." There was a gas station there now. A young man in greasy coveralls was polishing the windshield of a white and rusty Hudson automobile. And May and Tuck rolled past. The young man grinned and said to the driver of the Hudson, who lounged at the wheel, "Look at there, in from the country for a big time." And they chuckled together. May and Tuck clattered on into the village proper, past a Catholic mixture of houses, which soon gave way to shops and other places of business. A hot dog stand, a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, a 5 and 10, another gas station, a white frame building with a pleasant veranda, the Tree Gap Hotel, family dining, easy rates, the post office. Beyond that, the jailhouse, but a larger jailhouse now, painted brown with an office for the county clerk. A black and white police car was parked in front with a red glass searchlight on its roof and a radio antenna like a buggy whip fastened to the windshield. May glanced at the jailhouse but looked away quickly. "See beyond there," she said, pointing. "That diner? Let's stop there and get a cup of coffee, all right?" "All right," said Tuck. "Maybe they'll know something." Inside the diner gleamed with chrome and smelled like a linoleum and ketchup. May and Tuck took seats on rumbling swivel stools at the long counter. The counterman emerged from the kitchen at the rear and sized them up expertly. They looked all right. A little queer, maybe, their clothes especially, but honest. He slapped a cardboard menu down in front of them and leaned on the foaming orange aid cooler. "You folks from off?" he asked. "Yep," said Tuck, "just passing through." "Sure," said the counterman. "Say," said Tuck cautiously, fingering the menu, "didn't there used to be a wood once down on the other side of the town?" "Sure," said the counterman. "Had a big electrical storm, though, about 3 years ago now, or thereabouts. Big tree got hit by lightning, split right down the middle. Caught fire and everything, tore up the ground, too. Had the bulldozer all out." "Oh," said Tuck. He and May exchanged glances. "Coffee, please," said May. "Black for both of us." "Sure," said the counterman. He took the menu away, poured coffee into thick pottery mugs, and leaned again on the orangeade cooler. "Used to be a freshwater spring in that wood," said Tuck boldly, sipping his coffee. "Don't know nothing about that," said the counterman. "Had the bulldozer all out, like I say." "Oh." "Afterward," said Tuck. Afterward, while May was shopping for supplies, Tuck went back through the town on foot. back the way they had come out to the little hill. There were houses there now, and feed and grain store, but on the far side of the hill, inside a rambling iron fence, was a cemetery. Tuck's heart quickened. He had noticed the cemetery on the way in. May had seen it too. They had not spoken about it, but both knew it might hold other answers. Tuck straightened his old jacket. He passed through an archway of wrought iron curlicues and paused, squinting at the weedy rows of gravestones. And then, far over to the right, he saw a tall monument, once known down imposing, but now tipped slightly sideways. On it was carved one name: Foster. Slowly, Tuck turned his footsteps toward the monument and saw, as he approached, that there were other smaller markers all around it. A family plot. And then his throat closed, for it was there. He had wanted it to be there, but now that he saw it, he was overcome with sadness. He knelt and read the inscription. In loving memory, Winifred Foster Jackson, dear wife, dear mother, 1870 to 1948. So, said Tuck to himself, 2 years. She's been gone 2 years. He stood up and looked around embarrassed, trying to clear the lump from his throat. But there was no one to see him. The cemetery was very quiet. In the branches of a willow behind him, a red-winged blackbird chirped. Tuck wiped his eyes hastily. Then he straightened his jacket again and drew up his hand in a brief salute. Good girl, he said aloud. And then he turned and left the cemetery, walking quickly. Later, as he and May rolled out of Tree Gap, May said softly without looking at him, She's gone. Tuck nodded. She's gone, he answered. There was a long moment of silence between them, and then May said, Poor Jessie. He knowed it, though, said Tuck. At least he knowed she wasn't company. We all knowed that long time ago. Just the same, said May. She sighed, and then she sat up a little straighter. Well, where to now, Tuck? No need to come back here no more. That's so, said Tuck. Let's just head on out this way. We'll locate something. All right, said May, and then she put a hand on his arm and pointed. Look out for that toad. Tuck had seen it too. He reined in the horse and climbed down from the wagon. The toad was squatting in the middle of the road, quite unconcerned. In the other lane, a pickup truck rattled by. Against the breeze, it made the toad shut its eyes tightly, but it did not move. Tuck waited till the truck had passed, and then he picked up the toad and carried it to the weeds along the road's edge. Darn fool must think it's going to live forever, he said to May. And soon they were rolling on again, leaving Tree Gap behind. And as they went, the tinkling little melody of a music box drifted out behind them and was lost at last, far down the road. And that's the end of our story, Tuck Everlasting. Wow. Really good books like this, you hate to see them end. Our next book is going to be The Yearling. It is a long book. It has 33 chapters and 408 pages. It will take all of the month of February and half of the month of March to get it finished. But it is the next book on the docket. And somewhere in there we'll get to The Hobbit as well. So, my friends, until next time, May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace.